Carol had always been careful with money. As a retired accountant, numbers made sense to her. They were predictable, logical, unlike people. That's why, when she checked the mail that morning and saw the letter from the bank, her stomach clenched. She stood at the kitchen counter, sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating the neat rows of bills and statements she had yet to open. The envelope in her hands felt heavier than it should have. It bore the unmistakable red stamp, "Final Notice." Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. "This is to confirm the sale of your property at 742 Maplewood Drive. The final payment has been processed. Please vacate the premises within 30 days. Carol's breath caught in her throat. The words blurred together. Sale? Vacate? She flipped to the second page, scanning for an error, a mistake, anything that explained why the house she had lived in for over 30 years was no longer hers. Richard, her voice came out sharp, cutting through the quiet of their home. Her husband, Richard, shuffled in from the living room, his reading glasses perched on his nose. What is it, Carol? She thrust the letter at him. Tell me this is a mistake. Richard took the paper, his expression shifting from confusion to something much worse, guilt. Carol's heart pounded. Richard, what did you do? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he exhaled shakily and rubbed his forehead. I thought it was a good opportunity. A good opportunity for what? Her voice rose, and she forced herself to stay calm. But panic was already clawing at her chest. Richard swallowed hard. There was this man, Michael. He told me about an investment. He said if I sold the house and put the money in, we'd double it in 6 months. It sounded promising. The room tilted. Carol reached for the counter to steady herself. You sold our house? Without telling me? Her voice cracked. It was supposed to be temporary. Richard's hands shook as he set the paper down. Michael had all these credentials. He showed me proof of other investors who made millions. I didn't want to worry you until the money came back. Carol let out a sharp, bitter laugh. And where is it now? Richard, where is our money? Silence. Her blood turned to ice. Michael disappeared. Didn't he? She whispered. Richard's face crumpled. I tried calling. His number is disconnected. The website's gone. I went to the office address. But, Carol, I think we've been scammed. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Her mind raced, calculating the damage. No house, no money. At 62, they had no steady income besides Richard's small pension. They had planned for a comfortable retirement. Now, they had nothing. Carol took a deep, ragged breath, forcing herself to think. Her husband had made a terrible mistake. But breaking down wouldn't fix it. Her grip tightened on the letter. No, she would fix this. Carol felt the weight of the paper in her hands like a death sentence. The walls of the home she had built with Richard over 3 decades suddenly felt suffocating. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she tried to ground herself. Numbers, facts, logic. That was how she had survived every financial storm before. She needed to think, not panic. She set the letter down with controlled precision and looked at her husband. Richard, listen to me very carefully. I need every single detail. When did you meet him? How did you send the money? Every single detail. Richard looked away, his fingers twitching as he picked up the letter again as if reading it would somehow change its meaning. It was about 4 months ago. He muttered. At the golf club, Michael was there, talking to a few of the guys. He seemed successful, confident. He showed me charts, figures, testimonials from other investors. Carol's stomach churned. Of course, scammers always preyed on social circles, exploiting trust. And the money? How did you transfer it? Richard hesitated. Wire transfer. Carol's jaw tightened. Of course it was. She closed her eyes briefly, pressing her fingers to her temples. Wire transfers were practically untraceable, especially if the money had been funneled through offshore accounts. How much? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Richard swallowed hard. 700,000. The breath left Carol's lungs as if she had been punched. $700,000. Their entire savings. She gripped the edge of the counter, her nails digging into the wood. Tell me you didn't give him access to our accounts. No, I only wired the money. He said he needed full liquidity to enter us into the deal. Richard's voice wavered, his hands wringing together. I was going to tell you when the first payout came in. Carol stared at him. Richard, how could you? She stopped herself. The damage was done. Blame wouldn't get their money back. She took a deep breath, forcing her thoughts into order. 700,000 wired to a man named Michael. A ghost, by now. But every scam leaves a trail. And if there's a trail, I can follow it. She straightened, suddenly feeling like she was back at her old job, sifting through tangled financial records to uncover fraud. Only this time, it was her own life on the line. I need his full name. Any emails, texts, bank details. I need to see everything you have, she said, her voice clipped. Richard scrambled to grab his laptop. He logged into his email with shaking hands and pulled up the messages. Carol leaned over, scanning through them. The emails were well crafted, professional, persuasive, too polished. They used financial jargon, presented data in a way that felt legitimate. The wording was careful, designed to sound exclusive, but it was the bank details that caught her attention. There were multiple accounts listed, one for deposits, another supposedly for payouts. But Carol recognized the red flags instantly. Some of these accounts were linked to shell companies. A slow, dangerous fire began to burn in her chest. She had seen this before. Back in her corporate days, she had helped uncover a similar setup where fraudulent companies were used to launder money. This wasn't just a simple scam. This was organized, calculated, and if it was that well structured, there was a way in. Carol exhaled, her hands stopped trembling. She turned to Richard. I'm getting our money back. Carol sat down at the kitchen table, the dim glow of her laptop screen reflecting in her sharp, calculating eyes. The rage still simmered beneath the surface. But she pushed it aside. She couldn't afford to let emotions cloud her thinking. Not now. She scrolled through the emails, opening every attachment, every bank detail Richard had saved. A pattern was beginning to emerge. The shell companies weren't random. They were strategically placed across different states, each one existing just long enough to receive large wire transfers before being dissolved. But something else caught her eye. One of the accounts Richard had wired money to still appeared active, meaning it hadn't been drained yet. Her heart pounded. That meant there was still time. Richard, she said, her voice unnervingly calm. This account here, the one you transferred to last. It's still open. Richard squinted at the screen. So, what does that mean? Carol resisted the urge to snap at him. It means they haven't moved all the money yet. And if I can follow the transactions before they vanish, I might be able to trace where it's going next. She cracked her knuckles, a habit she hadn't indulged in since her working days. She needed to act fast before the scammers realized she was onto them. Carol opened a second window and started running searches, bank routing numbers, business registrations, corporate tax records. It was tedious work, but she knew where to look. Her fingers moved with the precision of someone who had spent decades navigating financial data. Names of offshore banks appeared, then disappeared, leading to a dead end. She gritted her teeth. Too slow. Then, an idea struck her. She pulled up an old contact from her accounting days, Jim Calloway, a forensic accountant she had worked with on fraud cases in the past. Without hesitation, she dialed his number. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Jim Calloway. Jim. It's Carol. A pause. Then a chuckle. Well, haven't heard from you in years. What's the occasion? I need your help, she said, wasting no time. I need to track money movement from a fraudulent account before it disappears. Jim's tone changed instantly. Tell me everything. She did. Every detail. Every transaction. Every lie Richard had believed. Jim let out a slow whistle. Damn, this isn't some small-time scam. Carol, these guys are pros. I know. Jim exhaled. All right, I have a few tools that might help. But if we're going to trace this in real time, you'll need to act as a potential new investor. Make them believe you're ready to send money in. Carol leaned back in her chair, her mind already racing. Bait the scammer. Get him to respond. And when he does, I'll be ready. She smirked. Michael had no idea who he was dealing with. Carol didn't waste time. She crafted an email, carefully mirroring the same language and financial jargon Michael had used in his messages to Richard. She posed as a wealthy widow looking for investment opportunities, playing into the exact type of target Michael preyed on. She read over the email one last time before hitting send. Subject: High-yield investment inquiry. Dear Michael, I recently heard about your investment opportunities through a mutual connection and am eager to learn more. I have a significant amount of liquid assets available and am looking for a secure, high-yield opportunity. Please let me know if we can schedule a call at your earliest convenience. Best, Elaine Roberts. It was vague but intriguing enough to get a response. Now, she had to wait. She didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour later, an email pinged back. Elaine, I'd be happy to discuss this opportunity with you. Let's set up a call. I have availability tomorrow afternoon. Looking forward to helping you grow your wealth. Best, Michael Sullivan. Carol smirked. Gotcha. She immediately forwarded the email to Jim. A few minutes later, her phone rang. Jim's voice came through the line. Low and serious. We've got something. What is it? The email he sent you wasn't masked properly. The metadata shows the originating location, Miami. Carol's mind raced. So, he's still in the country. Looks like it. And I dug deeper into the account Richard wired money to. It's linked to a fake corporation registered in Florida. Her pulse quickened, which means if I get him to send me payment details, I can trace where the money is going. Exactly, but you have to be careful. Carol, these guys don't play fair. If they realize you're onto them. I know, she said firmly. That's why I'm going to make sure they don't. She glanced at the email again, her fingers tightening around the phone. Michael had fooled her husband. He had stolen their money. But now, he had walked straight into her trap. Tomorrow, she would make the call. And she would play her role so well. He wouldn't see the knife until it was already in his back. Carol sat at the dining table, her laptop open in front of her, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She had spent her entire career analyzing numbers, detecting irregularities, and uncovering financial deception. This was no different, except now. The stakes were personal. She adjusted the microphone on her headset, took a steadying breath, and clicked on the video call link Michael had sent. The screen flickered, and within seconds, he appeared. Michael looked exactly as she expected, mid-40s. Polished but not overly flashy. With a well-tailored suit and a disarming smile. He exuded the air of calm authority. The kind of presence that put unsuspecting victims at ease. Elaine, he greeted smoothly. So good to meet you. Carol smiled, keeping her expression warm but slightly hesitant, the perfect balance of intrigue and caution that a potential investor might have. Likewise, Michael, I appreciate you taking the time. Of course, he said, leaning back in his chair. I always make time for serious investors. Now, tell me, what are your financial goals? He was already leading her. Good. Let him think he's in control. Carol tilted her head, feigning thoughtfulness. I've recently come into a sizable inheritance, she said, keeping her tone light. I'm looking for an investment that's both high yield and low risk. I heard about you through a friend and was intrigued. Michael's eyes gleamed with interest. Well, you've come to the right place. My firm specializes in opportunities that aren't available to the general public. It's all about knowing the right people. Carol pretended to be impressed. And these returns, how are they generated? Michael leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. We work with a network of international partners, primarily in commodities and currency exchange. Because of our direct connections, we bypass traditional banking fees and taxes, which allows for maximum returns. Of course, we only take on serious investors, people who understand discretion. Carol nodded as if she were processing his words carefully. That makes sense. And what's the minimum buy-in? Michael smiled. 200,000. Her heart pounded. He was already baiting her. And how'd I transfer the funds? He typed something on his screen, then sent her a link in the chat. Everything is handled through our private banking system. Secure, fast, and completely discreet. Carol clicked the link, her pulse quickening as the browser loaded. Got you. The account details appeared. A numbered offshore account, routing through multiple shell companies. Exactly what she needed. She kept her expression neutral. I'll need a day to move my funds. Can we schedule a follow-up call tomorrow? Michael beamed. Absolutely. Take your time. I'll have everything ready for you. She ended the call with a polite smile. Then immediately forwarded the account details to Jim. Within minutes, her phone rang. This is good, Jim said, his voice taut with excitement. The account is registered in the Caymans, but it's linked to a Miami-based clearinghouse. We're closing in. Carol exhaled, gripping the edge of the table. Michael thought she was just another easy mark. He had no idea that his entire scheme was about to come crashing down. Carol paced the living room, her hands clenched at her sides as she waited for Jim's update. Every second counted. If Michael sensed anything unusual, he'd drain the account and vanish, just like he had with Richard's money. Her phone buzzed. We've got movement, Jim said without preamble. The account you baited him with is connected to a money laundering network. But here's the interesting part. He hasn't withdrawn your investment yet. Carol's heartbeat quickened. Why not? Jim hesitated. Because he's not working alone. She swallowed hard. This is bigger than just one scammer. Jim continued. Michael's part of a larger operation. And someone higher up is calling the shots. Carol's blood ran cold. She had assumed Michael was the mastermind. But if he was only a small piece of a larger machine. This is good, though, Jim added quickly. It means we have a chance to trace the money before it disappears. I've already flagged the clearinghouse. If we time this right, we can alert the authorities and freeze the funds. Carol straightened. What do you need me to do? You need to keep him distracted. Make him think you're still on board so he doesn't touch the money. Carol nodded. I can do that. She took a deep breath, sat back at her laptop, and sent Michael an email. Michael, I've spoken with my financial advisor. And everything looks great. I'm excited to move forward. Would it be possible to set up a call later today? I just have a few final questions before sending the transfer. Looking forward to it. Best. Elaine. Her hands trembled slightly as she hit send. A reply came almost instantly. Of course. I'm free this evening. I'll send you a private link. She exhaled. Good. He still trusted her. Now, it was just a matter of stalling him long enough for Jim to do his work. She closed her laptop and clenched her fists. Michael had no idea. By the time he realized what was happening, it would already be too late. Carol sat at the kitchen table, her heart steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had done this before, played the long game, built trust, unraveled financial lies. But this time, it wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. This time, the stakes were personal. Her laptop pinged with a notification. Michael was ready for their call. She clicked the link, her face carefully composed as his image flickered onto the screen. Elaine, Michael greeted smoothly. Glad you reached out. Carol smiled warmly, as if she weren't planning his downfall. Of course. I just wanted to go over a few last things before I move forward. Absolutely, he said, his tone reassuring. I understand this is a big step. But I promise you, every investor I've worked with has seen extraordinary returns. Carol tilted her head, feigning curiosity. Speaking of other investors, how does this process work for them? Where does the money actually go? Michael chuckled, as if she had asked something amusing. Elaine, I appreciate your due diligence. But financial structures like these require a level of discretion. That's how we protect your assets. Carol nodded, pretending to consider his words. He was good, smooth, confident. He had likely run this scam 100 times before. I see, she said. And the funds, once I transfer them, how soon would I start seeing returns? Michael leaned in slightly. Typically, within 90 days. But given the amount you're investing, I can push you to the front of the line. Carol smiled, keeping her tone light. That's very generous. As she spoke, her phone buzzed with a message from Jim. Funds being flagged. We need 5 more minutes. She kept her expression neutral. 5 minutes. That was all she needed. Michael, she continued, if I wanted to increase my investment later, would that be an option? Michael's smile widened. Absolutely. Once you see how well your money performs, I guarantee you'll want to reinvest. Carol glanced at the clock. 3 more minutes. She let out a small sigh, as if relaxing into the idea. Well, that's very reassuring. Michael leaned back, clearly pleased. I knew you were a smart investor. Elaine. Her phone buzzed again. Done. Funds frozen. Carol's stomach flipped. It was over. She straightened, her warm smile fading. Actually, Michael, I have one more question. He raised an eyebrow. Of course. Her voice was ice. How does it feel to finally get caught? Michael's face barely changed, at first. Then, a flicker of confusion. I'm not sure what you mean. Carol leaned forward, her voice steady, deadly. I mean the accounts are frozen. The money trail is traced. And law enforcement is probably knocking on your door right now. The color drained from his face. She smiled. A real smile this time. Game over. Michael. The screen went black. Call disconnected. Carol exhaled, gripping the edge of the table as a wave of satisfaction rolled over her. Richard walked in, his face filled with uncertainty. Did it work? She turned to him, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. Yes. We're getting our money back. For the first time in weeks. She felt in control again. Michael had taken everything from them. But Carol? She had taken it all back. Carol stared at the dark screen for a long moment. Her breath coming in slow. Measured waves. It was over. Her phone buzzed again. Jim. She answered immediately. We got him, Jim said, satisfaction evident in his voice. Michael tried to initiate a withdrawal 5 minutes ago. But the system flagged him. By now, the feds should have him in custody. Carol let out a slow exhale. So it's done? Jim hesitated. Almost. The money has to go through a legal process before it's returned. But you'll get it back. It might take weeks, maybe months. But it's coming. Relief flooded her. She had prepared herself for never seeing a dime again. But now, there was hope. Thank you, Jim, she said sincerely. Don't thank me. He chuckled. You did the hard part. I just watched. Carol smiled. It feels good. It should. A pause. Then, more seriously, Jim added. But Carol, this could have gone sideways real fast. You were lucky. She nodded, knowing he was right. She had risked everything. But she also knew that if she hadn't, they would have lost it all forever. After hanging up, she turned to find Richard standing in the doorway. Watching her, his face was pale, weary. So, it's really over? He asked hesitantly. She nodded. It's over. He ran a hand through his graying hair. I don't know how to thank you. Carol, I don't even know how to make this up to you. For a long moment, she said nothing. The betrayal still stung. The weight of what he had done hadn't disappeared overnight. But as she looked at him, the man she had built a life with, who had made a terrible, costly mistake but never once stopped regretting it, she made a choice. We rebuild, she said finally. Together. Tears welled in his eyes. And he nodded. Together. Weeks passed. Then months. Carol had expected things to go back to normal. But they never really did. Something inside her had changed. She started reading more about financial fraud, not just for herself, but for others. The number of retirees and elderly people who fell victim to schemes like Michael's was staggering. One day, she saw a local community center advertising a seminar on protecting your finances in retirement. Without thinking twice, she signed up, not as an attendee, but as a speaker. And that's how it started. One seminar turned into a monthly workshop. People started reaching out for advice, for help. Carol wasn't just getting her own life back. She was making sure no one else would fall for the same trap. Her story spread. A news station picked it up. Soon, she was invited to speak on national television about financial fraud. She thought of Michael often, not with anger, but with certainty. He was behind bars, and she was free. Free to rebuild, free to help others, free to own her future again. And this time, no one would take it from her. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about resilience, intelligence, and taking back control. Carol's journey shows us the power of financial awareness and the importance of never backing down in the face of deception. She turned her pain into purpose, ensuring that no one else would fall victim like she and Richard did. What do you think about Carol's story? Did you find it satisfying? Comment, too. if you liked it, and 7 if you didn't. And if you enjoy stories of justice and redemption, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another gripping tale.